Bison football player accused of firing a gun at a house party back in September was in the courtroom this afternoon. 19-year-old Jaden Pickett is charged with terrorizing, reckless endangerment, and possession of a stolen firearm. He's being held in Cass County on a $25,000 bond, reduced down today from $50,000. Valley News Team's Bobby Fallett was in the courtroom where witnesses took the stand to make that happen. He joins us live tonight in studio with the very latest. Bobby.
Yeah, Courtney, you're right. Today was Jaden Pickett's preliminary hearing. Pickett pleading not guilty to all of the charges against him, which include those 4 Class C felonies. Now today, a Fargo police detective, an officer, and a woman who was there at the party on September 8th, they were called as witnesses. Now just before 1 a.m. that Sunday morning, they were called to the 1200 block of 11th Street North for reports of shots fired. Multiple witnesses told police that Jaden Pickett got into an argument with a couple of people before grabbing a 9mm handgun from his waistband and firing at the home. Now today, Pickett's defense argued that there are some things wrong with the evidence and that some of the witnesses, they are sensationalizing what happened. The prosecution pointing out that multiple Snapchat videos show Pickett pointing a gun at another person and even touching their chest with it. Prosecutors called a Fargo detective to elaborate on what those videos show.
He was walking towards Mr. Matthew and sticking the gun in his chest and continued to walk him backward.
And you'd made motions with your hand back and forth with the gun, which was about chest level. Is that fair to say?
In the chest.
And Mr. Pickett, as depicted in those videos, is physically making contact with Mr. Matthew as he's doing that?
Correct.
According to today, it was noted that there is not a video of Pickett pulling the trigger, but a bullet did hit part of the home, which was in a close proximity to others. The detective on the stand today also said that it was highly unlikely that the shot was an accidental discharge. The judge reduced that bond that you mentioned in part because Pickett does not have a criminal history.
All right, Bobby, thank you for that report. Again, no one was hurt in that shooting. You can read more about what led to Pickett's arrest on the free VNL News app.